read a passage of Scripture very familiar to us at this time of year. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a young woman engaged to a man whose name was Joseph from the house of David. The young woman's name was Mary. And the angel came to her and said, "Greetings, O favored one, the Lord is with you." And she was much perplexed by what these words meant, and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. And the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, for you have found favor with God. You will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and his name will be called Jesus," which means salvation. "And he will be great, and we will call Son of the Most High. And God will give to him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. And of his kingdom there will be no end." And the angel said, "How will this be, since I am just a young woman?" And the angel said to her, "The Spirit of God will come upon you, the power of the Most High will overshadow you, and the child will be born holy and called the Son of God. And now your relative Elizabeth in old age has also conceived a son. This is the 6th month for her who was barren. For with God nothing is impossible." And Mary said, "Here I am, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." As one wag put it, it's always darkest just before it goes to pitch black. You may suffer from seasonal affective disorder, as do I. We start our days this time of year in the dark. We commute in the dark home. Apart from the wondrous allure of the great city of lights at night, it seems like our anxieties are just more present. It's easier to envision the worst case scenario in this prolonged dark. And Luke's birth story reflects all of the vulnerability that we feel at this time of the year. It begins in dark times. The Roman Empire, of course, was a fantastic time of wealth if you lived in the eternal city, but our opening scenes come far, far from wealth, power, and fame. It's a teenage couple completely flummoxed by some vague promises from an angel. They barely know each other. They're bereft of resources. They're on a pilgrimage that they're forced to make because they're being taxed onerously at the edges of the empire to support the lavish life of the powerful who live far, far away. They have no connections, no family that steps up to offer any guidance. It's just the two of them on this crazy journey without any money, the feeblest transportation available, and no reservations in advance. Some of you here probably remember what that was like. When I got married, Kate had just graduated from college and had a job, but I was still a senior in school. My only car was a twice-wrecked Ford Pinto that I had retrieved from the side of the road on the New Jersey Turnpike near the George Washington Bridge. My brother and I fixed it ourselves with parts that we got from a mafia-controlled junkyard in the Bronx. My brother's girlfriend had taped a faded plastic rose on what was left of the antenna. It was mostly tan, but it had a quarter panel of orange and another quarter panel of blue. What was Kate thinking when I drove up in that junk pile? But she had the crazy optimism of youth fueled by the headiness of budding love, and somehow, some way, it's going to all work out. It'll be okay. And then there's the unplanned pregnancy. Just add that to the list of other challenges. We will step out in faith that somehow, some way, this is all going to work out. Never checked the odds. Never got any advice from the previous generation, except a divine admonition that came from my grandfather when I told him I had no idea what it meant to be a father at the age of 22. And in his deep Louisiana drawl, he said to me, "Don't worry, Charles. Parents don't make children. Children make adults." Sounded like God talking to me then, and looking back, I think it was. We will figure it out. And Joseph and Mary had to travel through places where violent men attacked other people. They had to get by Roman soldiers that could impress young Joseph into service for any length of time, for any reason whatsoever. They had to get to Bethlehem, and they find there's no room in the inn, and the best thing they can come up with is to sleep with the donkey in a horse stall. This is God's plan for the birth of the Messiah. All that vulnerability, well, you could crack that baby's head like an egg. As a grandfather, I want to call ahead and make some reservations for them. I want to loan them some reliable transportation. I want to pack them off with some soup. I want to make sure that friends of mine in Bethlehem and the medical field will check on them when they get there. That's not what God does. It's astonishing just how vulnerable this story is when it unfolds, and how improbable it is too. And Jesus isn't alone. No, Moses was born in an earlier era of persecution of the Jews, and his mother had to abandon him so that he might live. She made this little floating boat for him and put that infant in it and pushed it out into the middle of the Nile, hoping against hope that someone would find it. Can you imagine that day? Can you imagine what it would be like if you were so desperate that the best option you have is to cut loose your child in a wee little kayak on the Nile and watch them float away? Probably she brought her best friend with her that day, or her sister, and she focused as much love and hope as she can on that baby, full of so much guilt and so much sadness that she's not sure she can even live with herself, wishing like hell she could explain to this child that she didn't abandon him, but she had to make an untenable Sophie's choice, an impossible choice that she had to make, and that somehow, through God, God will just show up in time. It'll all work out. Here goes. May your life be full of adventure and promise, and may God show up. I can't help but think of all the mothers in this season who have that courageous hope. Mothers at the edge of the empire, so to speak, that are so vulnerable and overwhelmed and worried about their babies. Page 4 of the Wall Street Journal this week showed a mother in Qaraqosh, Iraq. It's one of the oldest Christian cities in the Middle East. They still speak Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke. It's a town of 40,000 people. It's now almost empty because it's been flattened by ISIS. Everyone there has been exiled, raped, killed. Churches are all desecrated, and this mother, who's separated from a couple of her children during the battle, is with a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. And as they walk in, and the reporters are just taking photos, she looks down in her house and finds this smashed picture of the Virgin Mary on the ground. She picks it up, hangs it back on the wall, and for a moment she presses her hand to it, undoubtedly praying for her children, that somehow they're alive and they'll be safe, willing them to safety, willing them to life. Page 8 of the Times had a young photo of a girl aged 7 standing in the obliterated streets of Aleppo. The paper called her the Anne Frank of Syria for remarks that she had written or were posted on Twitter. And I can imagine her mother, embarrassed that her child is describing these inhumane conditions that she lives in at the age of 7. I imagine her mother confused, without any good idea of where she can go to keep her daughter safe. She's angry, she's afraid, she's desperate. HBO special this week had a documentary on gays and lesbians in Cuba, where they still face tremendous persecution, open persecution, open discrimination, active violence every week of their life. One segment featured this transgendered child, born a boy, now a teenage girl, describing what it was like to be beaten and tormented as a child. And at one point, as she's describing this, and it's a small gathering of about 200-300 people who've come out in defiance of all of this hatred that's around them, to stand together for gays and lesbians and their family and their friends. She's describing how she feels about herself, and she starts crying. And you can see her mother get up from the back of the room. 200 or 300 people are gathered there. Her mother calmly walks forward while she's still speaking and just hugs her and holds her. Fearless, courageous love that mothers have. God bless mothers. And as you know, the shadows of the empire, so to speak, they're not that far from here. Last week I was downtown in Newark with Frank Bolden. We were at St. Benedict's Prep School. Del Barton is their sister school out here. St. Benedict's, the group that stayed behind in Newark after the riots of '68. And today their population, of course, all boys, 80% of them are black, 12% are brown, only 8% are white. And almost 10% of the boys live in a dorm on campus, not because they want to, but because their families are broken by poverty, by drugs, by dysfunction. These are the families that have been squeezed into ghettos over 10 decades because of Jim Crow laws that denied their grandparents and their great-grandparents access to loans for homes or for cars or for their own businesses, gave them limited education, limited job opportunities. They were denied the American dream. So they don't have the stability in their families that the rest of us take for granted. And we've come to see the miracle of their morning convocation. Some of you saw it on 60 Minutes because our own Michael Radutsky did a piece on the school a few months ago, shedding a little light on a dark corner of the Garden State. We're sitting in this gym full of 567 rowdy boys, teenage boys, 8 a.m. in the morning, all teens from the hood, sitting on the gym floor, filling the seats and the stands around the basketball court. You can imagine how loud and unruly that could be. We witnessed the daily miracle. The student leader of the group, not the principal, the student leader of the group, steps up to the microphone, raises his hand, and the entire room goes silent. The leader calls for the roll, and the team captains from every grade, and there's several, stand one by one to report those absent from their team. By 8 a.m. in the morning, they already know the whereabouts of everybody on their team and why they aren't at school that day if they're absent. They care about each other. They have to look after each other. They report to their team captain, and their team captain calls them if they don't hear from them. All around the school, you see this motto that's written on the walls. What hurts my brother hurts me. Frank and I meet with Father Ed Leahy, the rector of the school. He introduces us to two of the team captains. Father Ed says to me, these are two of our success stories. When we first met these two guys, they couldn't speak. Earlier, Father Ed told us more of their backstory, because basically these boys had been through so much as kids, so much instability in their families, so many disappointments, so much around them that was threatening, so much hostility from simply being poor and black and a boy in the hood, other people projecting on them threat and fear, that these boys, of course, had all introjected their anger. Father Ed sees this all the time. Most of his boys have so much introjected anger that they suffer from clinical depression. And acute forms of depression manifest themselves in black boys anyway, becoming sullen and mute. Father Ed says to me, you know, if you're a black kid from the hood, no one cares what you think, especially if you're a boy. No one asks your opinion about anything. Little surprise, these guys become mute. But it's coming also from inside, that introjected anger that morphs into depression, that morphs into sullen withdrawal. And I think about their mothers, because they probably don't understand everything that's going on with their son, but they do know enough to worry. They know that their sons aren't thriving. They know they're not flourishing. They're suffering. They may not understand it all, but I know they weep. Father Ed asks one of them about his future plans for college, and he sits up straight in the chair, looks at us in the eye, speaks in measured tones about the colleges that he's going to apply to and things that he'd like to study. Father Ed teases him about something, and the young man laughs and continues to answer the questions that Frank and I are asking him. Father Ed says, 3 years ago, he was mute. The young man looks at us, and I think of all the tough teens I've seen over the years from the hood, that sullen aggression that they project, that fear that they have. And I'm looking at this kid, he's so gentle and thoughtful and playful, respectful, mannered. This kid's blooming. And he's blooming because he's in a community of love and safety. And this kid has been shown the basic community of love that Jesus come to tell us about. This loving community is healing this kid, and this kid can't make it. I'm looking at these other young men in this team, and I'm thinking to myself, we can solve this problem. We can save these boys. Now, the miracle of the season, Christmas season, is not simply that the Son of God was born to one young woman a long time ago. The miracle of the Christmas season happens when the Holy Spirit finds lodging in each and every child, and a new birth takes place in them that blooms their resident potential through love and compassion, and that sense that they too are blessed. It's an improbable miracle, so to speak. When the angel says to Mary and to every child that blooms with love, with God, nothing is impossible. You know, we're all waiting for an angel to show up to announce good news and blessing, and guess what? The angels are actually sitting all around us this morning. To your left and to your right, we have the power to bless and bloom one another. And I asked Father Ed why they're so successful, because 98% of their students go to college, and only 12% of the adults in Newark have actually been to school. Is it the academics? Father Ed says, I like to think so, but the academics aren't really the key. The key, he says, is community. It's being part of a team. It's becoming accountable to other people. It's surrounding yourself with people that pray for you, that encourage you, that keep you on the path towards excellence. That's what love does. That's what Jesus came to show us. Father Ed says to me, this isn't rocket science. I asked him what the most fulfilling thing is about what he does, and he says, it isn't seeing them graduate, although that's a great step on the path. It's actually years from now when they come back to the school, and they introduce me to their spouse, and they introduce me to their children. That's the blessing. It's a symbol of their healing, because now they're stable, they're flourishing, and they can give because they're blessed. And I hope for you that profound sense of blessing that comes from holding a newborn in your arms. It might be an era that's dark in our world, and you might be in a difficult situation. You might not have enough resources for the challenges at hand, but when you look at that child and feel the life force coursing through your veins, you'll be filled with the irrepressible hope that transcends your circumstances, because you're blessing other people, and through that you're being blessed. You're just grateful to be alive. And that's why Mary says, here I am. Let it be with me according to your word. I don't understand everything that means, but I'm sure that it's good. Even if it's difficult and dangerous, it's going to be good. May you know that unbounded hope. Isaiah says, to you who walk in the great darkness, a light has shined. On the land that dwells in deep darkness, joy will overtake you as when the harvest comes, as when they divide up the bountiful treasure. For unto you a child shall be born, unto you a son will be given. And his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Prince of Peace. And on him they will establish a new life of justice and hope. Release your love, and may the divine spirit take root in a child around you, and may you be blessed to step out in hope and risk vulnerability for love, and watch as a miracle blooms before you. Amen.